Welcome to my shop, and welcome to my series of videos about the basic and safe use of the tools inside of the shop. In this video, we're going to be covering this tool, the drill press. The drill press is a very versatile tool, and you can use it on a lot of your projects. It has a few moving parts. We'll go over that, and we'll go over how to operate it safely. But it's not a very complicated machine, and I think that we can cover it fairly quickly and get you set up to be making projects of your own. When working with the drill press, there are three things that you can adjust. The most obvious of which is this chuck right here, which holds the bit into it and connects it to the shaft. Mine is designed so they can be hand loosened and tightened. And I can unchuck and chuck a bit back into it. It's probably more common to see the kind that has a little bit of a gear look at the top, and you need a key to tighten in the bits that you put into your chuck. The second most common adjustment on a drill press is this plate right here and its height. Now on mine, and I know I'm getting in the way to do this, there is a crank that I can spin to lift it up and lift it down, and on the other side there is a lock to lock it in place once I have the desired height. You're mostly doing this so that your shallow material is up a little higher and the larger material you're cutting through is down a little lower, just so you don't have to move the bit as much. One important thing to note, if you're going to go all the way through your material and you don't have a protective piece underneath it, is that you want to make sure that the bit is actually fitting through the hole in the plate. It's pretty easy to shift this plate as you're moving it. You want to reorient it before you lock it in and use it. The third common adjustment is the stop block, and that's this bit right here. And these are actually a little bit different depending on your drill press. But the purpose of this particular block is to make sure that my drill press doesn't go any further than I want it to here at the bottom. In this case, I'm probably drilling a hole through some material, but I don't want it to quite make it all of the way. So I've adjusted this stop right here to keep me from going any further than I want. You would remove that stop and put it all the way to the top if you wanted to penetrate all the way through the material. The final moving part that you're going to be working with when operating the drill press are these handles here. They are what bring it up and down, and they control a smooth movement of your bit. Now if you're moving in a large amount of space, you may need to use two hands and work your way around the knobs in order. Let's see how it works in practice. Now let's say that I want to drill a hole all the way through this particular 2x4. I've got a couple holes in there already, but they don't go all the way through. Well, one thing to keep in mind when you're drilling is that when you make the entrance of your cut, it tends to be very clean, but when you come out the other end, it tends to blow out and not be very clean. One way to help with that is to actually have a piece of wood beneath it so that the drill is still working its way into wood when it penetrates all the way through this particular board. So in this case, I'll show you how that's done. I need to lower my table to begin with. So that I can work inside of this area. And then I want to make sure that my blade goes all the way down, so I'm going to remove this current stop block and see where it gets to the point where it's almost all the way through. In fact, I can put this guide here so it just goes a little bit through the bottom plate right there, and I just slide that into place, and that keeps it from going any further. I then bring this back to center, put my material where I want to cut it, and I lock it into place. When you're working with the drill press, you've got two hands here. One wants to hold the material where it's going to be cut and to hold it firmly. If it's a large piece of material and a small blade bit like this, you shouldn't have any problem holding it in place. The other hand will operate the mechanism up and down. Now, if you want to be precise with the placement of your hole, let me give you one tip on that as well, and it involves another little tool. So let's say that I want my hole to line up precisely where these two marks cross. Now, a new woodworker might just come in here and try and get it as precisely as they can and push down. And that will get mostly where you want it to be. However, the larger that the bit becomes, the more it becomes in the way of your view. And honestly, you can slip a little bit as you're first coming down. So the best way to handle that is to use a center punch. And if you don't have a center punch, you can use a variety of other things like a nail and a hammer or a counter punch for a nail. Anything that can create a little bit of a divot. But I just take my center punch and I put it right in that hole right there. And I push down, and now I've got the center precisely marked. Almost all drill bits will have a little bit of a guide at the tip of them. And as I bring this down, if I'm anywhere nearby, it will just move the board into that guide hole. You might see a little wobble as it first does this cut, and that's it centering itself. And without that center punch hole, that little wobble would have driven my hole off my mark a little bit. When drilling through thicker material, your bit can sometimes get a little stopped up by the amount of chips and dust that accumulate on it. When that happens, simply back the bit back out a bit, let the debris come out, and then you can return to your cut. And there you go, there's the hole that goes all the way through. It had a small amount of tear out on it here. Part of that is because I forgot to move it over to an area that hadn't had any of these holes in it before. While the drill press is in general a pretty safe tool to operate, it can get a little bit difficult when the piece gets a little bit smaller or has characteristics that are harder to work with. For instance, this is not a piece of wood, but this is a piece of acrylic or plexiglass. And this material doesn't give as much as wood does. So if there's any sort of binding on it, it will grab this piece from me and put it in whatever angle it got bound in and just start spinning that around. Now normally that's not too big of a concern. You yank your hands back and it's not like a blade where you hurt yourself. Still, you don't want that to happen and mess up the cut that you're making and the piece that you're making. And we always want to be as safe as possible. So for those reasons, I use these. Now you can use a regular clamp as well and put the table in a position where you just clamp it from the side. But I have these clamps which actually can affix themselves to the table and adjust themselves to the material thickness itself. I put that in there and then that material is not going to move. So that's a safety consideration to think about if you're working with smaller material or a material that doesn't yield as well, or if you're working with a larger bit. Otherwise, the operation of this particular machine tends to be a fairly safe one, and it's a good tool to start you on your journey of woodworking. I believe that covers the basic and safe use of a drill press. It's a fantastic tool, it's very versatile in its uses, and it's very approachable for a beginner. I hope that it's one that you can find a use for almost immediately in your own projects. If you enjoyed the material that I presented in this video and it's helpful to you, please take a look at my other videos in this series describing the safe and basic use of the tools of the woodshop. In the meantime, enjoy making your projects. I'd love if you shared some of those with me, and I'll see you in a future video.